You are fluent in Latin. After a car accident, you find yourself in a fantasy world. In this world, humans have been slaves to other species, all of whom use magic. Humans have the capability to use magic, but only by learning the elves' language. After hearing it, you find that it is Latin. When I turned around, hoping that she'd turned away, I found her still glaring at me. Come this way now. And remember where we are, I won't be showing you around again. She was out the door and down the corridor before I could bring myself to move. A quick glance over my shoulder and I found myself moaning in annoyance. I'd never remember where my room was. Every corridor in this godforsaken place was identical, strangely smooth walls with precisely placed glowing lights. Every connecting hallway seemed to be a four-way stop, every direction a mirror of the others. Miraculously, we ended at a large room with low benches that had food laid out. There were half a dozen other humans in the room, all dead-eyed and focused solely on their meals. None looked up at me, and no one moved for me to have a place to sit. Shuffling myself awkwardly into a corner, I reached out and grabbed one of the empty bowls and took small portions of the scrambled eggs and what looked like oatmeal, only a shade of burnt orange. As each person finished, they rinsed their dishware in a bucket of water, and laid them out to dry. Then they were out the door, each intent on their own duties for the day. The woman who'd led me here ate quickly, and once she'd finished stood looming over me, not speaking but clearly wanting me to hurry. Shoveling the rest of the orange glop which I'd found to have no real flavor into my mouth, I stood and rinsed my dishes. The woman walked out the door, not waiting for me once again. I jogged to catch up with her, and found that we were headed down a dizzying staircase that, if my sense of up and down were correct, was below the massive building. Maybe these buildings were caves after all, raised above ground for some unknown reason. As we exited the stairwell, I found myself standing flabbergasted staring ahead. Hundreds of thousands of books sat on stone shelves that towered high into the air. The light here was not attached to any wall or ceiling, rather floating between long shelves. The few people in the room that I could see, each seemed to have their own small light following them as they walked. My fingers itched to grab the nearest book, but I stood still, waiting for the woman to tell me what to do. I also wondered if she was going to introduce herself, or if I'd just be left to call her the woman in my head forever. It's not like I could introduce myself either though. I instinctively tried to shove my hands into my pockets to keep them busy, only to find that these robes, just like my previous clothing, didn't have any. Noticing my motion, the woman turned to look at me. You'll be responsible for several things here. First and foremost, any time an archivist asks you to do something, you do it. I don't care if it's kissing their asses or wiping their boots. You do it. If you don't, you'll be beaten. I would tell you not to talk back, but I've been informed you can't speak at all, so instead I'd say keep your expressions on your face neutral. She motioned forward towards a stack of scrolls and books. Next, you, along with myself and others, are responsible for putting literature back on the shelves where they belong. She pointed to a colored string that hung from each item. You match the string with the shelf. Primary color is section, secondary is the shelf, tertiary is the final position. She grabbed one that had a large red section, a smaller green section, and then a white dot. She led me between shelves, and at one point I noticed that we too had gained our own personal lights. I noticed, due to the fact that the shelves cast long shadows between each aisle, an unnatural darkness lurking in the corners. When we reached our destination, she laid it lightly on the shelf, then turned back the way we'd come. Honestly, I was disappointed in the system. It lacked the fineness that the Dewey Decimal System had. It worked, I supposed, but unless you knew what you were looking for, there'd be no way to find it. You'll also be transcribing older records. The woman was saying, and that caught my attention. It seemed that they used an alphabet very similar to the one I'd grown up using. While a little difficult to read for some of the consonants, I definitely managed to read fire in the notes I'd seen laying around Yona's office before. I wanted to ask questions, but the woman just continued on, oblivious, and I was stuck there walking behind her, mouth open like some sort of demented goldfish. She spent the rest of the morning telling me, and showing me how to do various tasks. She never asked if I needed more instruction, and I didn't think it was because I couldn't answer. The afternoon she led me back to the room we ate in, and then back to the archive. After lunch she simply said, "Your turn," and watched as I replicated the tasks she'd done that morning. The only interruption was whenever an elf would pass by, she'd stop and bow low to them, and after the first elbow, I realized I was supposed to as well. I had no idea of how much time was passing, and when she finally said, "Enough," I found that my stomach was gurgling with hunger and that my eyes were burning with exhaustion. I followed the woman for the last time that day to the meal room, and then was left to find my room on my own, belly almost full, and thoughts of sleep had me confused and bumbling my way around the identical corridors looking for the cubby that was mine, rather than someone else's. What I didn't expect to find was a locked door with angry voices yelling behind it. "What does a session think that they're doing, sending another human here?" one of the voices said. I stopped, looking down both ends of the corridor before stepping closer to the door. I thought I recognized the voice as belonging to one of the elves from the night before. Yona should have known better. We have a limit for a reason. He isn't needed here. I'm sure he would have done quite well in the fields. That was definitely the other elf that I'd met. Tora said that she showed him the ropes today. If he didn't learn, then we'll punish him. Perhaps a little too much. Rid ourselves of him now. I blanched and stepped away. I would definitely be doing my very best then. Starting with finding my room. I turned and left, back the way I'd come. Maybe I'd made a left where I should have made a right. Several hours later, and I'd finally found my room. But rather than stop and sleep, I'd started tracing the path there into the mess back and forth, trying desperately to memorize it. I only stopped when one of the elves saw me and asked what I was doing. I opened my mouth to tell him that I was just trying to remember where to go. But no sound emerged. Frustrated, he simply told me to get back to my room. And I did.